I am Brad Keeler. He is Landon Barlow. Next up on Director's Cut, find out how the Central PA Conference in Hershey made him a lifelong ASCE member. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keeler. I'm the director of the Geo Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week, except during the summer and 1 week at the holidays, I interview a GI member who has stories to tell about themselves. Some of them are personal, some are professional, and all of them are fun. If you don't know anything about the Geo Institute, you should head over, of course, after you watch this interview, you should head over to geoinstitute.org, and there you will find out, among many other things, that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and that we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you see today, I'm feeling like you will. You should click like, subscribe, get notifications, and if you do those things, probably in that order, we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. With those formalities out of the way, we welcome our guest for this week, this President's Day week in the United States of America. It is Landon Barlow from Haley and Aldrich, where he is a senior technical specialist in the great state of Connecticut. We haven't had a New Englander on in a while. Welcome, Landon.
Oh, thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me.
We are going to have 10 questions the same way that we do every week, and 2 of them are the same ones that we ask everybody. We're going to start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Yeah. Well, like most of your guests on Director's Cut, I'm a geotechnical engineer. As you mentioned, I work for Haley and Aldrich here in our Rocky Hill, Connecticut office. Being a consulting engineer means that I get to work in many of the sub-disciplines of geotechnical engineering. I often work with institutions and developers to achieve their construction goals for new and renovated facilities. Sometimes I feel like a referee between the contractors and the design team. Sometimes I just feel like a defensive lineman getting ran over. But yeah, so I spend my time reviewing submittals. I make site visits, pretty much monitor all the subsurface aspects of construction. A lot of the areas I like to work in include slurry walls, calculations for slope stability, settlement, liquefaction is a lot of what I do. I also do supportive excavation, micropiles. And when I'm lucky, I get to work with rock mechanics. My background in hard rock mining helps out a lot with rock mechanics projects. Last week, I was doing pavement design. Sometimes I get involved in geosynthetics. A lot of the projects we work on involve closure of hazardous waste or CCR impoundments. So yeah, the great thing about being a consulting engineer is that my job changes frequently. Usually no 2 days are alike, and I just enjoy the broad range of work that we get to do, keeping things fresh. And I'm just continually amazed by how much there is to know about geotechnical engineering, like how deep the rabbit hole goes and how many there are. So I guess that's it.
And we'll get into a little bit of that later on in the interview. It's interesting that you used a couple of football terms in there, because as we tape this, last night was the Super Bowl, in case people didn't realize that had just happened. This next question was unrelated to that, but I feel like it segues very nicely now. What is your favorite TV commercial of all time?
Well, I want to start with my favorite Super Bowl commercial from this year. There were a few good ones. There were a lot of bad ones. But the one I liked was I think it was a Doritos ad where playing the triangle became like a huge trend and a rage. I really liked that, like how playing the triangle was suddenly like what everybody was doing. So I really liked that one from this year. Going back a couple of years, like a big COVID commercial, it was a Geico commercial where the hip hop group Tag Team covered Scoop, There It Is. At the end, they go, Sparkles. Anyway, I love that ad for some reason. But all-time favorite commercial actually came out before I was really watching TV. It's the original 1984 commercial for Macintosh Apple personal computers. It's got that George Orwell 1984 theme to it. And yeah, sometimes I just pull it up on YouTube. I like to watch it and think about how far we've come since, that first Macintosh Apple computer came out. And I wonder how things might be today if Steve Jobs and his products hadn't really broken through.
A very theatrical commercial and very different from the tag team insurance ad and Jack Harlow and Elton John playing the triangle. That we really covered a lot of bases there, but very strong. And yeah, I'm with you. Super Bowl commercials, I feel like every year I say, oh, there weren't that many great ones, but all it takes is a few to make it kind of into the canon, right? And then
oh yeah.
That's great. So one of my faves for everybody out there, you can go watch it. This is, again, we're going back to the Super Bowl, right? Reebok did a series with the Office linebacker about 20 years ago, Terrible Terry Tate. And those are amazing. So if anybody has an hour to kill and an internet connection, go make it happen.
Nice.
The third question is always the research or practice question. And you kind of get a tag team, see what I did there, of both of those here. You did your thesis at Bucknell on slurry walls, and you just happen to also love them. So can you tell us a little bit about why you love slurry walls and their brethren?
Well, a slurry wall is like this magic thing that you can excavate, a thin excavation almost infinitely deep. As long as you got the slurry properties right, you can just keep digging and keep digging. It's this magical liquid shoring. So I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to them. But how the stress and strain works within a slurry wall, the anisotropic stresses. There's so many applications, whether it's containment or foundational elements. It's one of these little niches of our field that can be applied to so many scenarios, and I feel like I'm learning more all the time. We've been using slurry walls really a lot since the late 70s here in America, and the research is still coming out. We're still learning more. We're still applying them to better projects and coming out with good outcomes because of them. And so, yeah, I really enjoy working on slurry walls, containment walls, and bentonite amended soils.
Do you have a favorite one that you've worked on, or maybe one that you didn't work on that you've just spotted in the wild?
I mean, there's the one in Australia. It's the deepest one. I think it went to 200 meters, so that was pretty deep. But the one we did at Bucknell, we did a fully instrumented field scale wall in 2016, and there's all this instrumentation and a solar panel, and I can still pull up the data today. We're going to do a 6-year review coming up any day now. We're collecting data for that. So that was my favorite slurry wall ever. I guess close runner-up would be in Red Dog, Alaska. I flew up to the north of the Arctic Circle near Kotzebue, Alaska in 2013 to install a cutoff wall on the back dam, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, just the year or the all day long of sunlight and living in Alaska and protecting the environment were really good aspects of that project.
So if anybody out there in viewer land is looking for a gift for Landon ever, it sounds like a slurry wall calendar might be a good choice. Either you could do the 12-month one, or I always like the tear pad, because then you get 365.
Yeah, they'd all just be pictures of the ground. When I swear it's down there.
Might not be the biggest seller, but those who loved it would really love it. So one thing in my research for this interview that I found, and again, I don't know how I find this stuff. People who have been on Director's Cut in the past, I genuinely don't know. I'm not some kind of wizard. All I have is the internet connection and 10 fingers, but sometimes you find some good stuff. You were in the Marine Corps. What aspect of your military service, well, first talk a little bit about your military service, and then what aspect of that service is most helpful to you in your current job?
Yeah. So I joined the Marine Corps when I was 18 years old, and I went right in pretty much right after high school. I was stationed in Southern California. I was a communications specialist, so it means I had a big backpack with a heavy radio in it. Or when we were lucky, we would actually drive the Humvees because there's a huge radio mounted in the Humvee, so it's like considered part of the radio platoon. So yeah, that's what I did, and some of the things that I really got out of the military that I continue to this day to try to strive for is preparation. It's such a critical component to success. The more you prepare, the better things are going to go every time. Also, the ability to adapt, change, and overcome challenges. A lot of times we're really set in our ways. We want things to go a certain way. We expect them to go a certain way, and they usually don't, right? So, that ability to adapt and overcome has always been good for me. And I think the thing that just is the most is military taught me to never give up. Just don't ever give up, no matter how challenging the situation is or how much you just want to stop. Keep going. Keep going. Stay true to the course, and know that great things are accomplished by small and simple means.
So I have to combine a few things here. So you said you were at 29 Palms. You also
Yes.
said you had to wear a ton of radio gear on your back. For those who don't know where 29 Palms is, it's in the desert. It's very hot there. And then I'll go back to your preparation. How did you prepare for a day out in the field with that stuff on your back?
Hydration. You drink a lot of water, right? You get salt stains in your camis at times. It was tough. Not only is 29 Palms very hot during the daytime, it's very cold at night. So there's really no amount of preparation that's going to make you comfortable out in the field. You're going to be sweating during the day, and you literally might freeze at night. So yeah, it was a perfect training ground for places like Afghanistan, and that's what we were doing there. And you learn a lot. You learn a lot as you go.
That is fantastic. That's a great story. So every now and then, I will say that really Director's Cut comes down to three things: sports, food, and music. I could talk about those three things pretty much all day. You are fortunate enough to get a music question, Landon. What songs and artists are at the top of your playlist, no matter what? They've stayed there for a long time, and they're just kind of your go-tos.
Well, I am lucky because I love music. It's a big part of my life. I'm listening, music whenever possible, and it's a broad spectrum. But like some of the top high hitters. I like to go back and listen to shows that I was actually at. So, you go to the show and the tapers are up front taping it, and they upload it to archive, and you can go back and kind of relive the moment. So that's fun. And one of the bands that I like to listen to the most is called the String Cheese Incident. So they're a fun like jam band. They do a lot of different styles of music. And they do a festival in Oregon called it's in Hornings Hideout is the venue. And their 2010 Hornings Hideout is just fire. So if you want to listen to some fun music, go check out the String Cheese Incident from Hornings Hideout in 2010. One of the songs I really like is called "Born on the Wrong Planet." That one really gets me going. Also, they cover a Talking Heads song called "This Must Be the Place." So that's a great, it's a good one to cover. So I like that. It's moving a little further along. I like progressive bluegrass bands like Railroad Earth, Yonder Mountain String Band. A song called Traffic Jam is like one of my all-time favorites from Yonder. Moving further along, reggae music been a big part of my collection. My friend DJ Tracy Moore out of Reno, Nevada, has his weekly show called The Reggae Shack on KWNK. So I love listening to that when I get a chance. Go to the archives. What else? Oh, some of the newer bands that I've gotten into, one called The Lower Lights. They're doing some fun stuff with mashing up like classic gospel music with like contemporary themes and styles. And then on Sundays, I'm listening to the Tabernacle Choir Temple Square. So pretty wide range of music coming through the speakers in my house.
That is amazing. I love it when bands cover This Must Be the Place, because so if you go on Spotify and you search for it, I mean, there are so many different cover versions. And they're from musicians that are really across the spectrum of genres. One of my favorites is Kishibashi, who's actually the son of a GI member, a professor at Old Dominion University. And he is like indie classical, I think is how I would describe it. and his cover is fantastic. He does it with a string quartet. It's really good.
Oh,
So
wow, I'm checking it out.
that was great. Thank you for that, Landon. Such a nuanced answer. Fantastic. I've never been a jam band guy beyond like I can listen to the Dead and I can listen to Sonic Youth, and Sonic Youth is not really a traditional jam band in that sense. So we teased this one at the top, and we ask everybody this, but sometimes people have really great stories for it, and you're in that camp. How did you first get involved in ASCE and GI?
Yeah, so I think I was always, kind of involved in the periphery of ASCE in undergrad, but it was really in 2015, I had the opportunity to go to the Central PA Geotech Conference in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And I was working in New Cumberland, and I had the opportunity to, go to dinner, and I sat down at this table. And it was the luckiest table ever. There was Professor Jeff Evans from Bucknell, Professor Mike Malusis from Bucknell, Professor Emeritus from Auburn University, David Elton. And then before the evening was over, the godfather of geosynthetics, Robert Kerner, sat down at the table and was holding court, quite literally. And it was so cool. And ever since that Central PA Geotech Conference in 2015, I've been involved in the Geo Institute. I ended up going to graduate school at Bucknell because of people I met and connected with at that conference. And I just really enjoyed everything that, has come from the Geo Institute. All the publications, GeoStrata, Director's Cut, the regional conferences, all those things have really enriched my career, my experience. And that was how it all started right there one night in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
We're going to talk a little bit more about the regional conferences later on in the interview. I want to ask, I don't know how to phrase this. So pretty much everybody who comes on the show from Philadelphia, we ask them for a Bob Kerner story.
Yeah.
I'm going to change yours up a little bit. I guess what was it like when he showed up? Like I say this a lot. This is a very unique discipline that, people like you and I have interacted with the legends like Bob Kerner, like Ralph Peck, and it's super cool. These are like the founding fathers of geotech in a lot of cases. I mean, what was going through your mind at that moment? Were you freaked out at all, or did you just feel super lucky?
I mean, the whole evening, yeah, I felt a little freaked out because I was by far the youngest person at the table. I didn't really know anybody there. But fortunately, Dave Elton was to my left, kind of coaching me through the evening. I didn't know who Bob Kerner was. I have to admit, I didn't know who he was at that time. The next day, I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. But yeah, it was evident that someone really important was there. All these, really, reputable professors got quiet, and kind of like the shift of the conversation went right to him. And it was such a memorable experience sitting there, letting him tell stories, listening to the interaction. It was awesome. It was awesome.
That's amazing, and seared into your brain forever and ever. I don't know if we've mentioned it at all throughout the course of the interview yet, but we talked about it a lot before we recorded. You're from Reno, and you spent a lot of your life in Reno. I told you a lot of Reno stories that I had, and I think that maybe because of choices I made, some of them were a little bit wild, right? What is the strangest experience that you ever had in Reno?
Well, I have to admit, I think you do have better stories about Reno, Nevada than I do. But, it's where I was raised. I went to the University of Nevada, go Wolfpack. And I think, most people think of Reno for the gambling and the drinking, maybe the Hot August Nights hot rod show that comes through. Reno's cool because almost everyone has driven through Reno, flown into Reno, or attended a conference there for some reason or another. So everybody's kind of been there. Lake Tahoe by far is the best part of Reno, even though it's an hour away. Yeah, Reno's a really interesting place. It's not far from San Francisco, so you get a lot of that Bay Area influence. The arts and music scene are really strong in Reno. As I mentioned, the university's right there in downtown, so that the sporting events and the college students really make up a lot of the the activity and the vibe that's happening in Reno. You can't not mention that Burning Man happens just about an hour and a half outside of Reno. So every year there's this huge exodus of burners coming through town with their art cars. And then when they leave, they are covered in this white playa dust. So geotechnically speaking, the playa dust is it's an alkaline silt. Okay, it's from the prehistoric Lake Lahontan, out in the Black Rock Desert, and it just covers everything. The water doesn't wash it off because the alkalinity just sticks on everything. So that's a kind of a fun thing, is watching all the burners come and go through town. If you ever need any really good stories, catch me at a conference. I'll tell you this one time at Burning Man story, but we don't have time for that now. I will tell you the strangest thing I ever saw in Reno was it snowed 6 feet in the valley on New Year's Eve. And then it didn't get above freezing until about like March or April. And so the snow was just everywhere. I think it was 2005. It was just 6 feet of snow all through the town all winter long. It was great. And then to add to that bizarreness, I have seen it snow in Reno every month of the year. And so seeing it snow in July or August in Reno, that was one of the stranger things I've seen.
That is pretty strange. I'm going to give you that. But I like that. I mean, it felt like, as you know, as a Midwesterner and now Easterner, it felt very different for me. I told you my story about food delivery when I called the restaurant in the phone book that was 70 miles away, and they were in the same phone book as Reno. I was amazed by that. The distances that people would travel just for everyday things was really fascinating to me. We don't think about that out east, you know, the grocery store's 2 miles away and it's right over there. So Reno, fascinating place.
Yeah, I remember when Reno got a Costco in 1993. It was a big deal. It was a big deal. We'd drive 45 minutes to go to Costco.
That's amazing. I swear to you, I know you've got a great answer for this. Viewers, we don't plan a lot of these questions on Director's Cut. They just come out of my brain. I randomly put them in an interview. We get great answers. Landon, did you ever have detention in school, and what was the story?
Oh, wow. Detention, huh? Yeah. What a nice way to take a break from the grueling social scene of high school, to just go read for an hour at lunch. That sounds great. So yeah, I remember a time I was in a rush to get to school in the morning. We lived kind of far away, and I stopped to get gas, though, pulling out of the parking lot. It's like a sketchy left, and I should have waited, but I kind of went for it. And then I realized I really shouldn't go for it. So I threw it in reverse and I backed up, but the guy behind me had pulled forward. So I backed right into the guy behind me. And so I got an accident. And of course, so I'm late first period, and I show up, and the teacher was like not having it. Like I was pretty much accused of lying for a while. I was like, oh, you got an accident. Whoa. Sure you did. Yeah. So I get sent down to the office, and I got the same lack of sympathy. Like, okay, yeah, you got an accident. Well, now you're also in trouble for missing school. And I think I got detention because I got in an accident. And then, of course, I got home. My parents were very unhappy with the damage to the vehicle, and had to pay for this other guy's fender, and got the car taken away and got detention. I mean, things really went downhill for me that week. So I learned, be careful when you're taking a left. And, like now I would just show them on my phone, like, no, really, I got in an accident. Right. At the time, I don't know, like there was zero sympathy for my my tough morning there. But I'll tell you this too. Intense. Yeah, it was a tough day. But like I mentioned earlier, things like detention is a great time to read. It's one of those things I think we all love doing, but rarely make enough time for. So, let me mention a couple of my favorite books. Yeah. Roughing It by Mark Twain, one of my hands down all-time favorite books. He's kind of like a predecessor to Hunter S. Thompson. Skinny Legs and All by Tom Robbins. Anybody interested in the Middle East issues or just a really good book should definitely read Skinny Legs and All. The Autobiography by Benjamin Franklin. That will absolutely blow you away. Benjamin Franklin likes to embellish his tales a little bit. It's really good. And then I think my last book that I maybe read during detention was A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. So to think the amazing perspective he had on society and where it was headed, and to think it was written in the 1930s, kind of blows me away. So that's my spiel on detention.
That was great. Oh, another wide-ranging one. I feel like every time I got detention, it was my own fault. Like I can't. I don't have a story like that where it was ever even moderately unfair. And I feel like also There was one class I remember. I don't remember the other ones. There was one class I remember I had in the 20s that I was tardy for it. Like it was definitely a number above 20 on my report card at the end of the semester, and no detention resulted from that. So you had a particularly strict situation there.
Well, I'm sure it was my fault, and I'm sure I had been pushing it with that certain teacher all semester long. So it just was the culmination of probably all my other actions. But
still great.
Yeah.
So, we talked about Reno. You moved out east, I guess about 10 years ago. And what was the most surprising geotechnical issue to you when you moved out east? What did you not expect?
Well, specifically here in Connecticut is the abundance of hard intact rock. Out west, hard intact rock isn't usually a problem. It's great. It's a great thing to encounter when you're doing your subsurface investigation. Out here, it's like you're going to have to blast, you're going to have to rock cut, grind, hoe ram, something to get the rock out. So that really surprised me that like all this good rock was such a problem. And the other thing that I just didn't expect, and I don't know if this is an East Coast, West Coast thing or just my maturing in geotechnical engineering, but I thought compressible soils were off limits. I didn't think that you would ever try to like design that as a bearing stratum or anything like that. And then as I see out here, in Boston and many other places, you engineer around these weak compressible soils and you push that envelope, making sketchy things work out. And I think that also surprised me quite a bit.
A veritable Tupac Biggie feud of geotechnical engineering. Like you said, that East Coast, West Coast. One of the places that you would have found out about some of this stuff after you moved out here was, again, those regional conferences. Hershey, Connecticut has one that you're now involved in. I love our regional conferences. We're the only institute in ASCE that does these, and we've got a ton of them. There's 20 usually in any given year. You can go all over the country and chapters are putting these things on. For you, what is the most valuable thing that you think GI regional conferences provide to the geotechnical community?
Well, beyond the technical knowledge that we get and keeping up to date on the standard of practice, I really get a sense of belonging and connection and camaraderie. I think geotechnical engineering is kind of a lonely field. You're out there on your own a lot of the time. And so when we all get together and realize that there's a bunch of other geo nerds, that feels great for me. I can just imagine this like lonely existence, never, really connecting with other people who are passionate about Boussinesque distributions and things like that. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits. The Geo Institute has a lot to offer, and I think these regional conferences really are at the pinnacle of that. It unites us, it makes us get connected, we can learn together, and they're accessible to almost anyone. I see people from students and all types of people, geoprofessionals attending these conferences, and I think everybody gets a lot out of it.
So for our viewers, you can find out about all our regional conferences, the national ones too. But right now we're talking about the regional stuff. Head over to geoinstitute.org, click on events, and you'll have a full list there. Also look at the e-update twice a month. We try to keep it updated with all the local and regional events happening. We're going to have a bonus question here.
Let me give a plug for GeoConnecticut first.
Oh, yeah, you have to do that.
April 21st, we have our spring geotechnical seminar right here in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. We'd love everybody to come. And then in September, we have our conference called GeoConnecticut. We're already lining up great speakers for that. So please come join us.
And I can personally vouch for that. I have been to GeoConnecticut. It is a blast, a great way to kick off the fall. It's usually the first regional conference of the fall season. And you guys make it great. So now our bonus question, you wanted to talk a little bit about skiing, and I'm going to let you do that.
Thanks.
But I'm going to make you contrast East Coast skiing with the Western skiing, and make sure you're not too harsh.
Oh wow. Well, I just got back. I spent the weekend up at Sugarbush in Vermont, and it was what my dad calls dust on crust. It had rained a couple of days before and then got very cold and snowed about an inch. So it was bulletproof with that like little 1 inch of fluff on top. And I think that's just par for the course out east. I was fortunate to ski in Lake Tahoe most of my life, and not every year is good. Sometimes you just get a bunch of Sierra cement, but some years are really good in Lake Tahoe. And yeah, I guess that would be the biggest comparison is, we get excited about 5 feet of snow in Lake Tahoe as we're here like 6 inches. I am very happy about that. Yeah. So there's some differences. Although I'll have to say my very first time skiing out east was at Sugarbush in 2018, and it was the third nor'easter in a row that had come through, and it was perfect. And I didn't understand why people complained about East Coast skiing. It was 5 feet of fresh powder. I loved it. So it can be good out here. I just think it's a rare experience.
One thing you might like is once it gets later in the season down this way, like from now on out, of course it's not real snow, but you could go up on those slopes in West Virginia or Western Maryland and you can ski in a t-shirt because it's 62 degrees out there. It's unique. So Landon, you made it through all the questions and even the bonus one, and you did a fantastic job. We covered a lot of topics today, and that is what makes Director's Cut special for our viewers. If you liked what you saw, and you're here at the end, so you probably did, click like, subscribe, get notifications, and of course, we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. So Landon, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
And hopefully, all of our viewers will see you in Connecticut at some point at one of the chapter events or in Hershey. Hershey's coming up pretty soon for everybody who wants to make that every 18-month pilgrimage. We will be back with a brand new Director's Cut. You know it, in 7 days.
Fun fact about Landon, I had a radio show at Bucknell every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. The Lacuna. And on the Lacuna, we would play everything from jam band music to reggae to progressive bluegrass, you name it. If it was in my iTunes, I would put it on if I felt so inspired. And yeah, so I like to play the audio.